Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris and welcome to an exciting new video series where I will be interviewing some MOCists from around the community and, if we're lucky enough, actually meeting up in person and taking a look at their builds for my channel. So first up today we have a MOCist who, if you're in the Bionicle community, you probably are aware of him. He goes by Forge of Artakha on Instagram, or Travels of Takua, and he actually just gave me this signed Bionicle comic by Greg Farshi himself, which is incredibly rare and something that I absolutely will be treasuring for my own collection. Now, Daniel, aka Forge of Artakha, is one of the most talented LEGO Bionicle builders out there. And before I even met him, I was really following his Instagram. I would highly recommend you do check it out. I have it linked in the description below, where he not only posts a pretty regular stream of custom mocks that kind of reimagine classic Bionicle characters, all in his own style, but also provides a caption as if it was written by Artakha himself, kind of like one of the guidebooks that we would see for Bionicle back in the early days of 2006 or so, when we saw the Rahi and Dark Hunter books. It's really just written like that, like Artakha chronicling what he thought of all of these people in the Bionicle universe. So it's super, super cool. Would recommend you check out his builds. But so, of course, we don't just have me talking about them here. Daniel was, thankfully enough, in the area somewhat, and he was able to come on over and actually bring a ton of his mocks for us to look at for the channel. And so this series will be split up into 3 different parts. Number 1, aka this video, will be focusing on me interviewing Daniel and talking about his journey with LEGO, how he got into Bionicle, how he got into mocking, what he does today, and some of his upcoming projects, and giving a brief overview of some of his favorite mocks. Part 2, which will be coming out very soon, will be going in depth, providing almost like a mini Bionicle fan review on every single one of the creations that he brought that he's already posted. And part 3, we will be taking a look at some sneak peeks at stuff he hasn't actually posted yet online or on Instagram, so do stay tuned for that. Quite excited to go through those, and of course giving my own fan and review-esque thoughts on those as well. And so, without further ado, let me introduce you to Daniel, aka Forge of Artakha. Alright, so today we have here Forge of Artakha, aka Daniel. Thank you so much for being here. Now, this is the first in a series of builder spotlights. I'm incredibly excited to take a look at some of the amazing mocks that we have here, and also talk to you about how you got into LEGO Bionicle and what your mocking journey has been.
Thanks, Chris. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, okay, so I guess we'll just get started. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you got into LEGO and Bionicle and mocking? I know that's a lot, but
sure,
kind of an introduction would be great.
I'm happy to talk about it. This is a total treat. So I am one of the original fans. I have very vivid memories of buying the original Kopaka canister when it first came out. I was probably in like first grade at the time. I have a super vivid memory of like building the original 2003 Makuta on my grandparents' like kitchen counter and just like running around with that in like Takanuva, and like this was like my childhood toy.
Nice.
And I remember just loving like the story. My mother was a school teacher, so I'd go to school with her and I would have a lot of time before and after school. So I'd spend hours and hours on the Matanui online game.
That's right.
And you sometimes had to spend hours on it because it was very like puzzle based. So and they would update it every couple months. So like you would hit a point where like you could see that they were about to add like a new expansion, but you didn't quite know what. So there's a lot of mystery, and that kind of added to the story. And from there, I read all the novels. I read all the comics, which I brought a couple here today. I have all the original comics. So this was like a huge foundational part of my childhood. And then I went off to college, and I kind of continued playing around with like the kind of the community. I was really big on BZ Power. I spent a lot of time in the RPG section. Shout out to the BZ Power homies. And then around COVID time, once like kind of quarantine hit, I was on my own for the first time after grad school. I had finally grabbed all my like Lego bins from my parents and had it in my own place. And suddenly I found that I had a lot of time on my hands in quarantine and a lot of Lego in the closet. So I decided to dump out all of my Lego and really kind of fall back into nostalgia. And I created 2 Instagram accounts as a result of that, and now 2.5 years later, here we are with my new hobby, which is actually my old hobby.
That is so cool to see. And of course, if you want to check out his Instagram, they are linked in the description below. Would highly recommend, because there's so much cool stuff that comes out of it. Now, I'm curious because I've been following your Instagram for a long time, well before I even met you and everything. And one thing that continuously impresses me is how you're able to create different variations of the same character. And you have like a ton of different versions of Tahu, and you have completely reimagined interpretations of the classic characters that we know and love. Where do you get the inspiration for kind of coming up with these variants? And maybe if you can talk about what have been some of your favorite versions of characters to make, and what sorts of stuff are you interested in telling stories, and especially coming up with the captions for your Instagram posts as well. I love reading those captions because it really feels like you're immersed in this extra additional part of like the expanded universe of Bionicle lore or something.
That makes me really happy to hear, so thank you for saying that. I'm glad that other people get joy from it, because I get a lot of joy from it.
Yeah.
It's been a fun hobby for me. So to kind of get to the question of like how I do different variations of the same character, it's often a criticism of the original sets that they would kind of clone one set over and over and over. And I always thought that if they just had taken a little bit of time and just put a little bit more differentiation on each of those sets, they actually would have been really cool. So that was kind of where the initial idea came from. And I understand from a design point of view on Lego's end, like that's a convenience. That's so that they can put out a lot of different sets just by kind of changing out colors. So I'll kind of start with a baseline frame, and then I'll tinker around with that frame and try to give each of those different variations its own kind of separate character and distinctiveness. Whereas I think the criticism with the original Lego sets is that they just changed the color, and that was it for a lot of the sets up until about 2006 and 7. Like the Baraki kind of fixed that a little bit. As far as like the different variations of like Tahu, if anyone has seen the G2 concept art book, there's a lot of amazing unused concepts of a lot of the original Toa being redesigned for Generation 2, and very few of them actually got translated into being sets. So one of the initial ideas when I made the Forge of Artakha account was to do my best to try to create what a set would have looked like for each of those G2 variations of Tahu. So this was kind of the end product of that project, but I created, I guess this would be 11, maybe 12 if you count the Taraga Tahu.
Wow.
But in a very short amount of time, I put together a lot of different Tahus, and it was a fun little project to come home to and just make a new Tahu based on the concept art, and kind of gave me a guide to work on. And it's been fun. So concept art is a great source of inspiration.
I'm a big fan of that concept art book. I love it so much. There is a free PDF available for download. If you haven't seen it already, would highly recommend checking out that incredible G2 art book. I was lucky enough to purchase actually a physical copy from LJ a few months ago, so it's been so cool just going through that book and seeing all the concepts. I mean, I immediately recognized this one from, or I guess inspiration of this one from one of the concepts there, but there's just so many, from the heroes to the villains and the creatures. Just
the villains especially, with some really cool unused concepts.
Like there's like a squid one, and there's a one with like a bone hammer or something, like all sorts of crazy
like a
stuff.
Mask stealer one that looks like almost like a rhinoceros.
So
some really cool ones.
I would love to see more MOCs. I'm surprised there aren't more MOCs based off of those, because I mean I've seen a lot of yours and I've seen a couple others, but not a ton based around those concepts.
You're right, and I have to imagine that just because not enough people know about the concept book. It was kind of a very quiet release, and it kind of came out right towards the end of G2, kind of fizzling out. And then another source of inspiration is a lot of the sets, honestly, are really just fun frames to build with. So like, for example, my version of Artakha, because he is kind of a contemporary of Umbra, they were created around the same time. They're both products of the Great Being. The Great Beings, in my kind of take on the story of the canon, I think of them as like almost like the firstborn children of the Great Being. So I purposely designed Artakha to use the same frame as Umbra. My version of the Shadow One is actually the base frame of the original Shadow One set, and I've just added onto it. But if we take apart kind of the armor, you'll see that it's the exact same frame as the original Shadow One. I've just added to it. Same thing is true of my version of Tahu. I've taken the same basic design principles of the original G2 sets and simply added to it. The only ones here that are like fully custom are really these two, and while these ones are all different kind of collaborations with other people's styles and kind of taking ideas from other people, obviously giving them credit, and then kind of incorporating that into my style and picking up new kind of techniques along the way.
That is so cool to hear, because one of the most impressive things I think about your mocks is that they really retain the visual design aesthetic and style of a lot of original Bionicle sets while still feeling super unique. I totally did not notice that the frames were the same before until you pointed that out. That is super cool, and later on in the video, actually, when we take a much closer look at each of these builds, we'll be doing some direct comparisons, like the shadowed one compared to the original actual combo models. So we will actually see that in action, which is super awesome to see. I think a good time now is if you could kind of walk us through what each of these characters are, maybe at what point in time you built them, and maybe talk some inspiration for how you came up with all these builds.
Sure. I'm actually going to start from here and move my way down.
Okay.
Because what really got me back into building, I took like a long hiatus because of college and grad school and just being away from a lot of that stuff and just being busy with life. The TTV Canon contest really kind of brought me back in. That was kind of the initial inspiration. So the very first thing I built once I dumped everything out was my version of Artakha, again, kind of using the Umbra set as a baseline to kind of start off. And the gold mask came much later. Originally it had a white mask, and I had a very clear vision that did not go with the canon. I had like a very white and teal kind of vibe, and a lot of people online disagree with that interpretation. That is totally okay.
Fair.
But this is my personal interpretation of Artakha, so when I'm writing from his perspective, this is kind of who I imagine to be either thinking or monologuing, or it's from his perspective. Lariska is probably my most recent of the ones up here that was built actually in anticipation for the TTV contest for Lariska, and then that was canceled. And then I was very happy that you actually reintroduced those contests, and I was very excited to enter this. And I'm a big fan of the winning model, so congrats to Ferox for that. Really, really fantastic model. I hope I can build it one day, but this is kind of how I personally picture Lariska. I'm very, very happy with this. A biogrammer by the name of Fritz Mox helped me with the torso, so I have to give him credit for the torso. The torso was really his inspiration. He helped me with that, and then I created the arms and the legs and the head. I'm particularly happy with the dreads. I'm really afraid to take it apart because I don't know if I can get that exact twist ever again. The shadow one I've had, I think since I started my Dark Hunter series. So when I create any mock, I try to make it part of a story. So I'll kind of stockpile a series of mocks and try to create a story out of the mocks, kind of echoing what Lego would do. Greg Farshi would often say that they would build the sets first and write the story afterwards. So I'll get kind of a loose idea for a story. I'll try to make as many mocks as I can within the time that I have to build.
Yep.
And then I'll try to spin a story out of what I've kind of assembled. So I had an idea to do kind of a revamp of the Dark Hunters. There's so many and they have such cool character designs. So this was built kind of to go with that. And I'm very pleased with how he turned out, because the Shadow one is a criminally underused character for a criminal overlord, and the set has a lot of potential. There's also some issues with it, so this was my attempt to kind of create the character that we had in our mind when we kind of read about the character. This is actually my oldest existing mock still. This is from probably 2004. This is from when I was on BZ Power and was doing much more kind of writing my own original characters as part of the RPG community. So this was a kind of Toa of Ice veteran. He has cybernetic arm and legs, so he's definitely seen some action. His name is Corin, and if I had the misprint white tattoo, I would definitely put that on him. But he's definitely... What's that?
Do you want it?
If you have one, I will happily take it.
I will give it to you the next time we meet. Seriously, yeah, like I have an extra one.
I would be so stoked about that. So the misprints are the only mask I think I don't have, aside from the Toys R Us exclusive Ultimate Doom mask. That one has been tricky to find. But other than those two and like the Comic-Con exclusives, I've spent a lot of time hunting down all of the sets and masks that I did not have as a kid. So this is like my oldest kind of mock that still exists. This is kind of the byproduct of my Tahu series. I did a Tahu Time Surfer series, so this is kind of what I would depict as my version of G2 Tahu with the G2 Vahi. And both this mask and this are both from Shapeways. And then this is probably my most custom build yet. The torso in particular is really, really intricate. There's a lot of different pieces. The goal was to make kind of almost like a steampunk version of a Rakshi that maybe either the Order would commission or that the Zeans from Zeo would commission, to combat the Brotherhood and kind of use fire against fire. Someone at someone at BrickCon gave me a prototype all white.
I got one.
Crowder, yeah. So I have that tucked away in here. So very excited about that. So I'm just very pleased with how this guy turned out, especially some of the parts usage on the backside. There's some Fantoka like carapace pieces that I feel like add some really cool shaping. And then I also run a Travels of Takua page, and it's been in hiatus for about a year because I've just been busy, but I do intend to finish it. I got him all the way through Kokoro and then stopped right before Kininui. So this is going to be kind of the chaos-inspired Makuta from the original Matanui online game, with the kind of little mini Makuta that goes with that story. That to me is like the iconic interpretation of Makuta. So later on we can kind of interchange these two masks, but this is kind of my take on the original interpretation of Makuta, who I thought was both the most terrifying and like the most effective as like a villain. He actually kind of lost a lot of his luster, I feel like, in the later interpretation. So this will always be kind of like the original Makuta for me.
Nice.
And then the two Matoran are actually inspired by designers from Instagram. So my last series I did was kind of a Matoran themed series that was really inspired by the work of other really amazing builders. So the initial idea was to kind of make homages to some really amazing builders that I really admired on Biogram and on Flickr, and take some of their initial ideas of Matoran that they had made and then turn them into new Matoran. So just like people would create kind of their own Matoran out of the Metro Nui sets or out of the original Matoran sets, I wanted to kind of show that you could do that same concept with anyone's Matoran build. And one of the cool things about the Matoran is that there's so many different styles of them, and they're from all over the world. So I really wanted to show that there's a really cool diversity to the different types of Matoran that could exist, just like there's a lot of cool diversity in people, and there's a cool symmetry between what goes on in the Bionicle world and kind of the themes of the human world.
That is a great way of putting it. Well, thank you so much for walking me through all of these. I am definitely not a MOCist, so I'm constantly impressed with the immense amount of creativity, as you said, from so many people around the world and around the community who are just coming up with their own designs and iterating on different aspects of characters. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your thoughts and your story about your experience with Bionicle. To be honest, when we first started out with this video interview, we were thinking of making this just one big video. But after, of course, throughout the course of today, we've been filming and we've been doing a lot more conversations about Bionicle and LEGO in the future. We decided to split this up into 3 different parts, so you have much more content to look forward to. We, of course, for the next video, will be going in depth into all of these models, kind of treating it like mini Bionicle fan reviews in an extent, kind of just bringing them all together, showing some comparisons to some of the original models, and that's something I am so excited to share with all of you. But honestly, I think we've wrapped up this first part of the Builder Spotlight with a great interview done. Thank you again so much for being here, and if you have any final thoughts or stuff you want to hype up for the viewers for the future videos, let us know right now.
Well, I want to thank you, Chris, for inviting me. This has been a total treat. What a fun way to spend a Saturday. Hello to everyone at home in the Bionicle community. Thank you for your time and for just your attention. Like, this has just been a fun hobby for me. So the fact that other people get enjoyment out of it is just like icing on the cake. So thank you to everyone for the love and the support. And I'm pretty busy with work, but whenever I have off time, this is what I like to do. So definitely expect.
I feel that.
Definitely expect more in the future whenever that comes. I can't promise exactly when, but there is definitely a lot more on the way.
And if you stay tuned to part 3 of this video series, we will actually be taking a look at a sneak peek of some of the stuff to come, because you've run alongside some other models for us to look at, which I can't wait to talk about. We'll do some more reviews of those in part 3 of the series. So stay tuned for that. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of these builds, and what are you most excited to see looked at in depth for part 2 of this video series coming very, very soon. Thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for taking the long journey out to bring these here, and I cannot wait to go more in depth into these builds, so like and subscribe if you want to see that next part. Alright, and with that, we have summed up part 1 of this video interview series where I take a look at a MOCist work and talk about their life and journey of building with LEGO. Thank you so much to Daniel, aka Forge of Artakha, for being here and doing this. This has been such a fun experience, and I can't wait to show you parts 2 and 3 of this fantastic interview series. Let me know down in the comments below if you were aware of who Forge of Artakha was, what are your favorite builds he's done, and if not, if you go check out his Instagram, let me know what are your favorite builds that you can see on it today. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more stuff like this coming very soon, and bye for now.